many migrants and their families to flee Central America. And the numbers, they really tell you everything that you need to know. Of the roughly 32,000 unaccompanied children that crossed the border so far this year, over 16,000 of them are from Guatemala alone, followed by thousands from Mexico, Honduras, and El Salvador. Meanwhile, migrants with children total over 59,000 families, and once again, over half of them are from Guatemala, followed by Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico. So joining me now is Genevieve Wood, the Senior Communications Advisor with the Heritage Foundation. Genevieve, yeah, the numbers really speak for themselves. And when you look at this, El Salvador has a homicide rate of 80 per 100,000 inhabitants, a poverty rate of 65%. I mean, no wonder these people want to leave their countries and come here.
What's called the kind of northern triangle right below Mexico is El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Right. And you're right, the homicide, I think those three countries account for the top, they're in the top 5 of homicide rates. So this is where it tells you, Kristen, that bad public policy has bad consequences. If you look under the Obama administration, what did we do? We did things like we cut the Department of Defense. And part of the funding that was cut there was money that was used to go into those countries and into Mexico and try to fight off the drug wars. So we're seeing now that we didn't do that. And in cases of like maritime drug trafficking coming in, we were not able to stop up to 25% of that coming into this country because we were cutting things like the Department of Defense. I'm, and myself and those at the Heritage Foundation would be the first to say that sometimes foreign assistance is not spent correctly, but this would be an area where I think we're reaping bad benefits of what we didn't do.
But explain for folks who don't really understand or don't really know, I mean, what is happening in these countries that is causing these kinds of ridiculous homicide and poverty rates? Let's start with El Salvador, and we're gonna put some of these numbers up for you so you can just kind of see, there we go, that 80 per 100,000 inhabitants homicide rate. What's happening?
Well, you have gangs in many cases running these countries. You have drug cartels running these countries. And the reason you do, even though they may have governments involved, who's really in charge of these different smugglers and cartels? And what you see happening there is them taking their own people, getting those people who are very desperate, saying, I'll pay you money to get me to the U.S. And what we don't have is Mexico coming in and helping. What you see in Mexico right now is you've seen the elite there care very little about the poor in their country, and because of that, you see a leftist nationalist kind of movement coming up, and they're not willing to cooperate with the U.S. They don't want to stop these people in their country. They want to help get them to the U.S., and we're seeing them show up on the southern border.
And so in terms of U.S. aid and what the U.S. is doing to try to stop or help these people before they get to our border, I mean, again, the numbers, Guatemala, 16.5 million, 9 million from Honduras in U.S. aid, 72.7 million to El Salvador. Is this money being spent properly?
Well, in some cases, we need to be spending more in these cases to make sure that we're actually tackling these problems. I mean, things like, for example, Honduras, they have when it comes to airplanes, an aeronautical unit that was using to fight the drug war. And at one point during the Obama administration, we said, we're not going to let you work with Israel to get that aircraft fixed. Those are the kind of things that, again, sometimes they're misguided policy, sometimes it's dumb policy, and sometimes it's just wrong thinking about policy. We can be working much closer with these countries so that the problems are contained there and beginning to be fixed there so that people don't feel like they have to flee their country. But let's also be clear. Some people do need true asylum, but not everybody showing up on our border truly needs asylum. If they did, they could be asking for it at port of entry the proper way. That's not what they're doing right now.
But even if the U.S. did everything that you're suggesting that the U.S. do, it would still take years to fix this problem, right?
Well,
if not decades, decades.
We spent years at creating it. You're absolutely right about that. But look, that's why laws matter. And that's why it has to be clear to those south of our border and north of our border that to come into this country, there's a proper way to do it. It's why we truly do need immigration reform. But that's not about just catch and release and letting people come across our borders, frankly, like the Democratic Party wants to do right now. What it is about is saying we have laws, we need to fix our system that it's more merit-based, that it's very clear how you get in this country, and that you do it the proper way, and that if you don't, you're not going to get to come in and stay.
And that's a debate that's going to rage on Capitol Hill. We're going to have to leave it there. Genevieve, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Leland.
All right, much more on the immigration debate all weekend long here on Fox News. Tomorrow, Fox News Sunday.